So with Assassin's Creed Mirage being out for over a month now, and many now finished with the game, there's been a pretty large demand from the community for there to be a DLC. However, before the game even released, the creative director confirmed there were no DLC plans for this game. But a lot of us believe that was something that could be subject to change, depending on the popularity and success of the game's launch. I mean, it would only make sense to make a DLC if the game was wildly popular and has a lot of concurrent players. And while we don't have official numbers, it seems the game is actually performing better than Ubisoft even expected, especially with it being a smaller title and priced $20 cheaper than the standard full release price of $70 US. There was also a little panel on the home screen that states additional content for Mirage is on the way. Now who knows necessarily what that's referring to, whether it's DLC, extra contracts, or just more store items. But I don't think it's entirely impossible that Ubisoft changes their mind here and gets a team working on making a DLC for this game. I personally really want that to happen, as I just want more to do in Mirage, and there's so much potential with some of the storylines they could follow in a potential DLC. So in this video, I wanted to compile a list of what I believe are some of the best ideas and concepts for an AC Mirage DLC and why they're worth exploring. So one of the first ideas that popped into my head that I'd like to see when I initially played Mirage was a DLC following the events of Mirage's story, but from Roshan's perspective. It could all take place within the same world, as we know Roshan spent significant time in Ambar, Alamut, and Baghdad, so the team wouldn't have to create an entire new world for it. Roshan is obviously a master assassin, so we could use all the same tools and gameplay mechanics we have with Basm. And I believe the character is more than interesting enough to stand on her own in a story. Plus, I'm curious as to some of the things she was up to while Basm was off hunting down the Order members. It may even help players get a better insight into her backstory and some of her motivations. I know there was a novel released going over her backstory, and it'd be cool to see some of those things incorporated a little more here. She's also voiced by the terrific Shorey Aghdashloo, who is one of the coolest, most unique voices on the planet, and is one of the biggest names we've had voice a character on an Assassin's Creed project. There's just a lot that makes sense here to me, and again, she'd play very similarly to Basm, and you can use the same open world, so they wouldn't have to change or add too much for a DLC like this. Maybe sprinkle in some new tools or tool modifications, and a special ability for Roshan to replace Assassin's Focus, since that is unique to Basm, and I think you have a really solid foundation for a DLC. Maybe by the end we could even get some insight into her adventures after Mirage. Which actually brings me to my next Roshan related DLC idea. I will give a spoiler warning here real quick because I need to talk about Mirage's ending to present this idea, so if you haven't finished yet, you've been warned. But my next idea was, instead of just following Roshan's perspective for Mirage's main story, it could be centered around what she does after Mirage's ending, where she of course leaves the Brotherhood. There's still a big gap of time we don't know about from Mirage's ending to where we see Roshan in Valhalla as kind of a solo wanderer, so I'm curious what exactly she got up to in that time. Did she continue to try and serve the Brotherhood's interests? What is this seed she wanted to plant in Jerusalem? Does she ever see Basm again? Because it's a pretty insane coincidence that they both end up in England around roughly the same time. I think all of these questions would be interesting to explore. Now, this idea might be a little more difficult to bring to fruition because I doubt Roshan stayed in Baghdad and the surrounding area for all those years, so they may have to create a new world and setting if this idea were to be pursued. And again, with the limited budget and scope of Mirage, plus the fact that they wouldn't have much time to develop a DLC, I don't know if that's possible, especially if it's only Ubisoft Bordeaux working on it. Now, the next idea, which I'd say is definitely the most popular one, is a DLC following Basm and Hytham with the Brotherhood in Constantinople, which is where Sigurd from Valhalla met them after all. This could really help fill in the gaps between Mirage and Valhalla, give us more insight into how Basm thinks and operates as a hidden one post the ending, which I think would be super interesting, and we'd get to see Basm mentor Hytham Hytham, as he becomes a hidden one as well. Plus, a new setting in Constantinople, which is perfect for an AC game. Constantinople has been used in this series already in AC Revelations, of course, but this would be about 650 years before that, so it's safe to assume it'd be much different. Mentor Rayhan also asked Hytham to spy on Bazum, so that's another very interesting angle I'd like to see unfold. To be honest though, I think this idea is just too big for a DLC. If anything, I'd love to see this as a sequel to Mirage. You have an entire new world and setting in Constantinople and its surrounding areas. You could have some sort of threat from the Order of Ancients. There's the whole Bazum-Loki storyline that could be further explored. The relationship between Bazum and Hytham, and digging deeper into Bazum's true motivations and loyalty towards the Brotherhood. And of course, it could eventually lead to meeting Sigurd and sailing for Norway. I think there's a lot of potential in that just can't be squeezed into a smaller DLC. Now, an idea I do think would work for a DLC is staying in the Baghdad and Alamut area and follow Bazum as he mentors a young Hytham into becoming a hidden one. That way you can keep the same world and further explore both Bazum and Hytham. And it would be a cool kind of full circle moment, since in Mirage we started as the student being taught by Roshan, and then in this DLC we'd get to be the master teaching Hytham. I'm sure there's some sort of conflict for the Brotherhood that the writers could come up with, whether it involves the Order or some form of corruption in Baghdad, or perhaps an internal fight within the Brotherhood could be interesting. Again, something that really allows us to better understand this version of Bazum and where exactly his loyalties lie. Maybe you could even get a few sections playing as Hytham. I really would like to see some kind of story going into the Bazum and Hytham dynamic, as Bazum essentially recruited Hytham while he was still of pure intention and completely loyal to the Hidden Ones. It'd be interesting to see how that's changed since he's decided to look out solely for himself from now on. Again, lots of potential, I think. And if I were to choose from any one of these ideas to be made into a DLC, I'd like to see this one. Constantinople would be really cool, but I think that's unrealistic to expect from a DLC. Sure, Valhalla had huge DLCs like that, but that was a massive game with different studios working on them, like Ubisoft Bordeaux actually. So I just don't see something like that being made for a Mirage DLC, especially considering they had no plans for DLC and wouldn't have much time to develop it. If there was a DLC, it'd have to be something that uses the same world and gameplay mechanics, I'd imagine. Still, I just want more of this game, and I think there's so much prime potential for a DLC, it would be a real bummer to let it go to waste. But let me know what you guys would like to see the most out of these DLC ideas, or feel free to comment some of your own ideas below. As always, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and considered subscribing to the channel if you're new. A special thank you to my members for supporting me, and other than that, thanks for watching, and have a great rest of your day, Assassins.